Welcome, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Hello, everybody. I'm Bryanne. And I am going to kick this off with a story. So a little over 20 years ago, I moved from a suburb of Toronto to California for university. This was quite the culture shock. I remember telling my friends from home that being on campus felt like I was on television. Everywhere I looked were beautiful, smiling, attractive people. And here I was, please don't take photos, awkwardly eating a donut off of a dangling string before I walked into my new life of California amazingness. Wearing Oakley sunglasses and board shorts meant I was going to fit in, right? Right? My university required that all freshmen take an Introduction to Humanities course. And you could select from a list of predefined classes that met this requirement. I selected a course called Love and Deception. No doubt because I thought it would increase the chances of having exciting romantic encounters. I was 19, after all. Now, I'm not so sure it did that. In fact, I'm 100% confident it didn't. I mean, you saw the photo. But what I can say is that more than any other experience in my academic life, this course changed my understanding of the world. Although we were reading works of art like Madame Bovary and Plato's The Symposium, what will always stick with me from this class was the approach that was taken in teaching it. You see, for the first few incredibly impressionable months of my university life, instead of having one professor lecturing us on the meaning of the texts of these great authors, we had two professors who presented two radically different perspectives twice a week, every single week. These two professors would look at the exact same words from the same page of the same book. In some cases, a novel that had been studied for centuries, and come to extremely different perspectives on the meaning. And they would discuss those different perspectives openly, respectfully, and with curiosity. And as observers of this intellectual ping-pong match, we as students would come away with a far more nuanced and sophisticated understanding of the material. I remember being captivated by the discussion and completely shocked that there was not one agreed-upon interpretation. Unlike every other academic experience I'd had up until this point, here, there wasn't a right answer. There wasn't one approach. Even some of the smartest people in the world could look at the exact same thing and come to a different conclusion. And here's the thing: no one was wrong. This had an immense impact on me. It was an empowering light bulb moment. It gave me the agency to think critically, to withhold judgment of other points of view, and to formulate my own perspectives. It opened my mind in a way that I still have trouble articulating. And it modeled for me a world in which different perspectives and approaches could not only just coexist, but together could enhance our understanding of whatever topic was at hand. Different ways of doing things could make us all better. Fast forward to 2024. In our world today, we are inundated with clickbait headlines on our search engine feeds and our social media feeds that quite literally feed us with formulaic definitions and directions on what it means to be a great designer. how to become a better designer in 30 days, a 25-step program for becoming a great designer, 10 qualities you need to be a great designer. And so it can be easy to believe that there is just one right way to be a great designer and that there is one right way to design, and that mastery over craft is achieved through the perfected execution of established tools and techniques and adoption of celebrated best practices, the quote, right way to do things. And you could forgive all of us, every single one of us, for occasionally falling into this limiting, reductionist, and arguably paternalistic dogma. But I'm here to tell you that this is absolute nonsense. And as we go on a journey together of exploring the concept of mastery, I hope to arrive with you at a place where we can view the future of our craft with far more empowerment, inspiration, and reflection. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The title of this talk is Redefining Mastery. So let's start with a definition of mastery. A quick Google search generates the following definition from Oxford Languages. Mastery is 1, comprehensive knowledge or skill in a particular subject or activity, and 2, control or superiority over someone or something. Now, before all of you English majors out there come for me, I'm not here to challenge the dictionary experts of the world, because clearly this definition has validity across a range of contexts. But what I do want to take a moment to unpack is how this understanding of mastery may be impacting our ambitions and our relationship to our craft. I would offer that embedded within this definition are 2 inferences. The first is that it is indeed possible to achieve comprehensive knowledge or skill in a particular subject, in our case, service design. This is not inconsequential because it insinuates that it is possible to reach complete knowledge in service design, and it would then follow that mastery is achieved when you've reached a point where there's nothing else to learn. With this definition, the objective becomes the end of learning. Second, I would suggest that this definition implies that there is some supremacy in mastery. The words control and superiority are used intentionally. This is a dictionary, after all. It suggests that in our craft, we can reach a point where we can command it in such a way as to have superiority over it, or worse, over other practitioners. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that this definition comes from Oxford Languages, and that almost identical definitions can be found in the Cambridge Dictionary, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, and the Collins Dictionary. These concepts of control and completeness are very much aligned with the individualistic ideals of Western culture. But what if we understood our craft to be boundless, with no possible end to learning? Just like there was not one right interpretation of the classic novels in my Love and Deception class, what if we understood service design to be a constantly evolving craft in which we understand the need to continuously interrogate and inspect our current tools and techniques, discarding them when they do not serve our purpose, when they reinforce stagnation, or worse, when they inflict harm? Shuhari is a Japanese martial arts concept that dates back hundreds of years and forms a critical aspect of the Aikido practice. It offers us an understanding of mastery that does not hold the same assumptions of control and completeness that we saw in the Oxford Dictionary. Rather, it presents 3 stages of mastery, which roughly translate as follows. Shu, keep the form. Ha, detach from form. Re, transcend form. Let's take them each one by one and understand how we can use this frame to imagine for ourselves a rich and dynamic career in service design that extends well beyond the years of perfecting consumer journey maps and service blueprints. First up, the shoe stage. Here, beginners should first learn the forms purely and superficially. In this stage of mastery, we protect the integrity of our tools and techniques. We use them in their purest form. And we learn to perfect these tools and techniques within a set of fixed conditions, because varying these conditions would make it too hard to learn. So we're learning in an intentionally controlled environment. In our world, we're seeing this come to life through the incredible, amazing degree programs and otherwise academic programs in service design around the world. And indeed, recent graduates from these programs often demonstrate the shoe stage of mastery. The case studies from the early career portfolios progress through the double diamond effortlessly. The aesthetic quality of the outputs of this work is very, very high. And the designers themselves can talk about their approach and their process with a high degree of technical competency and confidence. And the services that were designed as part of this work are most often not implemented, because that was not the point. The intent of the exercise was to apply the tools of our craft, things like journey maps, things like service blueprints, in their purest form. Now, here's where it gets particularly interesting for designers. In Aikido, the average time that one will spend in the shoe stage is 10 to 15 years. For service designers, the average amount of time that we will spend in a controlled learning environment solely dedicated to learning the tools and techniques of our trade is approximately 2 years. And then we are thrown into the professional sphere, which is most often a wildly uncontrolled environment. Budgets get cut, leadership changes, priority changes, a project can go from mission critical to sidelined overnight. Things happen. In fact, things are constantly happening. Real life is unpredictable and it's chaotic. And here's where things can get tough. And it can become easy for designers to get stuck in shoe. When this happens to us, we often form a very strong attachment to what we view as right and wrong. And we hold very rigid and judgmental perspectives of others and other ways of doing things. If you ever hear someone say, "This is the right way," or "we have to do it this way," that is often indicative of someone who is stuck in shoe. Absolutism and dogmatism reinforce a closed mind that isn't open to further learning. But if we embrace a developmental mindset, we open ourselves up to the next stage of mastery. Here, we must embrace a beginner's mind and not think of ourselves as more accomplished than we actually are. And we have to be humble enough to accept that the things we do will not always work. Whereas in shoe, we meet challenges with force, so we try to force through a technique or a tool. In ha, we respond to resistance, so things like a change in deadline or a change in priority or a budget cut. We respond to this by effortlessly moving into a new technique or a new approach. The ha stage is where we can begin to inject our own creative expression into the practices that we have been taught, and we begin to develop a personal style. But importantly, in Aikido, it is emphasized that making gains in this stage doesn't always mean just leaning on creativity. Rather, it often actually means losing or abandoning the way you've done something before. Indeed, at this stage, we know enough to question whether a particular tool or technique will be helpful and if what we are doing makes sense. Whereas previously our practice was a lot of copying and pasting, Here, we now introduce experimentation. And it is said that this Ha stage is actually the last stage that the vast majority of us will experience. But for a few, another stage of mastery exists, the ultimate stage of mastery, Re. Here, we transcend form and fully detach from the practices we have learned. Ultimately, you must forget about technique. The great path is really no path. You cannot learn your way to Re. There's a quote that says, "It is not so much taught as arrived at." And it's not a continuous state. Rather, it opens up moments of spontaneous creativity. It's really intuitive execution that is driven by inquiry and self-reflection. But importantly, and this is my favorite quote in the presentation, Re is not an abandonment of form in a self-indulgent orgy of "I'm so senior, I can do what I like," and call it service design. Indeed, so while we do things differently, we also have to ensure that our creativity never corrupts the actual craft. And we do that by holding on to and aligning to the essence of service design and our principles. As Pablo Picasso once said, "Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist." But easier said than done, right? How do we actually do it? And so that's what we will spend the rest of this talk talking about, because I have found that there are 3 ways to move oneself from Shu to Ha and create the conditions for Re to appear. Number 1, focus on outcomes and impact, which we've heard about today. 2, seek out novel experiences. And 3, play. Let's take them one by one. First, we must focus on the outcomes and impact of our work and hold this in far higher regard than the purity of our practices and the aesthetic of our outputs. Now, really think about this for a moment. Think of a project you recently completed. What was the impact of that work? What changed as a result of your efforts? And if something did change, was it what you had wanted or intended? As service designers, we design with the goal of changing the status quo. And if leading a perfect process takes precedence over whether change occurs, we have missed the mark, and we have bypassed our own critical thinking. So let impact and outcomes be your mirror. They will tell you how you are tracking along your journey towards mastery. Second, seek out novel experiences. Neuroscientist David Eagleman says, "The human brain owes its creative success to the fact that inputs are constantly being smashed together with other inputs. So every experience you have is raw material for your brain to create with, and all of these inputs get fashioned into new ideas." Put very simply, the richer and the broader the inputs, the more your brain has to play with. Within our design practice, we already have a lot of tools and techniques to simulate and stimulate this mashup of inputs. We host cross-functional workshops, knowing that if we bring people together with different disciplines and different perspectives, and we create the conditions for them to share those different perspectives, we are likely to open up the solution space exponentially. There are a plethora of ideation techniques that are explicitly designed to stimulate this mashup of inputs. So for example, we might ask workshop participants to take the best idea that you've created and the worst idea that you've generated and bring these together and come up with a brand new idea. But one technique that I believe is radically underutilized in a lot of design practices is that of analogous inspiration. And put very simply, analogous inspiration is when you improve a service or experience by identifying what is the emotion that we want to elicit in this experience, and then closely studying other disparate places and spaces where that same emotion is evoked. Consider, what can be learned from a doctor about delivering upsetting news? From a writer about storytelling? Or from a luxury sales associate about customer service? When we lean into the whole of the human experience and we seek inspiration from unexpected places, we create the conditions for creativity to flourish. And we have a lot of fun. But one message that I really want to drive home is this. Yes, we have established tools and techniques within our design toolkit to help broaden the inputs that our brain has to play with, and we should be using these more. But what I believe is really at the heart of the science behind creativity is a call to action to get out and live life. Live a life of learning, of adventure, and exploration. Seek time and shared moments with people who are radically different from yourself and who have different lived experiences. Fill up your brain with as many sights, smells, sounds, memories, moments, skills. Fill it up and know that your brain will naturally take care of the rest, smashing these inputs against each other and fashioning them into new ways of doing things. This living of a rich and diverse life, I believe, does more to build our creative confidence and competence than any established design technique. And so, just as I implore all of us to live this life of eclecticness, I also urge all of you hiring managers out there to also seek out people who have leaned into these growth-filled, multifaceted, winding paths. Lastly, to create the conditions for creativity to flourish, we have to play. As author Steven Johnson has said, you'll find the future wherever people are having the most fun. Play triggers the release of endorphins. It's the brain's feel-good chemicals that helps to stimulate the mind, relieve stress, and it boosts creativity. It silences the inner editor, the inner critic. It's that psychological barrier that censors our thoughts and ideas. There are plenty of opportunities within our craft to play. We just need to lean into them. So yes, journey maps, very, very important. But have you ever created a playable board game before? Or a real-life maze? And of course, personas, archetypes, all of these things are very important. But have you ever been inspired by dating app profiles or created a Craigslist or Kijiji ad? And yes, concept tests are great. I personally love them. But have you ever created a real-life modular simulation space to simulate an end-to-end future experience in real time? Over the years, teams I've been a part of have done all of these things. We experimented, we played, and we figured out how to do things a little differently. And so while I have the stage, I'll also offer a personal plea to all of you. At a time when low-fidelity prototyping seems to be on the verge of extinction, please, let's create space for it. Invest in Lego and Play-Doh and little wooden figures and felt. Sketch and sketch some more. Get up, stand up. Role play and just play. Now, I have one more point that I really want to make with you here today. Up until now, we have framed the pursuit of self-reflection and creativity as the pursuit of mastery. But there is something far more critical at stake. It is a fact that our world was not designed for the vast majority of people who live in it. In most cases, our world was designed for wealthy, heterosexual, cis, non-disabled, neurotypical, housed, white men. And I use the word design intentionally. And so if we want to create a different world, we need to interrogate the tools and techniques that got us here. We must consider how our design practices uphold and reinforce systems and structures that have impacts on people and the planet that we do not intend. Any system produces what it was designed to produce. So in the spirit of this, I want to elevate and amplify the work of Creative Reaction Lab out of St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. They've created a field guide to equity-centered community design. And I think it's an excellent example of how we can evolve our craft of design to dismantle systems of oppression, inequity, and inequality rather than reinforce them. All right, here we are. We've arrived at the end of this talk, and I truly hope you're feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to take on a new journey of growth and learning and mastery. Because as we've learned, the perfection of service design tools is absolutely critical to building expertise in our craft, but it is only the first stage of mastery. Focusing on outcomes and infusing creativity consciously into our work helps us advance through the stages of mastery. And 3, to build a service design practice that truly delivers diverse, equitable, and inclusive and sustainable outcomes, we must break free of the constraints of our current tools and methodologies. I wish you all a life and career filled to the brim with new experiences, deep self-reflection and inquiry, courage and confidence to do things differently, an immense amount of creativity, a huge amount of personal growth, and most of all, a ton of fun. And I personally can't wait to see it. Please check out this book by Kath Davies. Everything I learned about geology is from here. And also, if you'd like to connect, I'm around. So thank you so much for your time today.
One question? One question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for one question. Remember, you can put them online. My one question is, sometimes it's hard to get into this playful mood. What do you do for yourself to get into this play mindset?
It's a good question. I think I also am a naturally playful person, so I think the challenge for me is to also try to bring everybody along.
Yeah.
But you can't really just dive into something crazy. I mean, sometimes you can, but you have to gauge the group, right? And so I think the key thing is getting physical and putting things in front of people that remind them of their youth. We were all kids before. We were all kids. That's why Play-Doh's effective. That's why Lego's effective. People like tactile things. They like to build. And when you put stuff in front of people and you create the conditions and you get people out of chairs and you get people out of their regular space and you give permission to be fun, then I think it can be pretty playful and successful.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right.
Big round of applause.